Midnight Jesus, episode 3.
Midnight Jesus. Let's go.
Long time coming.
Man. Life.
We're going to get straight to it, man. Tonight's topic, DNA bloodline reconstructing of the pre-fall Adamic genome throughout history. Is personality more nature or more nurture? Behavioral and molecular genetics. Genes are the basic biological units that transmit characteristics from one generation to the next. Personality is not determined by any single gene, but rather by actions of many genes working together. Behavioral genetics refers to a variety of research techniques that scientists use to learn about the genetic and environmental influences on human behavior. Behavioral genetics is based on the results of family studies, twin studies, and adoptive studies. Overall, genetics have more influence than parents do on shaping our personality. Molecular genetics is the study of which genes are associated with personality traits. The largely unknown environmental influences, known as the non-shared environmental effects, have the largest impact on personality. Because these difficulties are not systematic and largely accidental or random, we do not inherit our personality in any fixed sense. We have the Bible, we believe in the Bible, we believe that the God of Israel is the creator of this universe. Wouldn't the God of the Bible know about genes? Well, if we're claiming the God of the Bible to create everything that we see, he must have known about genetics. How does that play in the biblical narrative? People separate, their faith from reality. But what we're doing, especially with these movies, is that we're plugging the Bible in reality and reality in the Bible. And we found no contradiction. To the point where, like you said too, these movies are going to be like the Dark Knight of the gospel movies. If you took away the Batman suit, it would still be a good movie. Like, you could still have the same movie without the Batman suit because it was plugged in reality. And this is what people are going to see when they see these movies. But in order to do that, you have to plug the whole Bible in reality. So how does DNA play in God's plan for humanity if he created DNA? You know what I'm saying? And all that stuff we just read about, DNA plays a big role on personality. Of course, they got nature and nurture. But, we see the actions of a God in the Bible, like him wiping out nations, wipe out woman and child, animals and everything. That the whole purpose of the scriptures, the whole purpose of Israel, for those who believe in the Messiah, which is Christ, was Christ. So Genesis 38. And it came about at that time that Judah departed from his brothers, Adulamite, whose name was Hira. Judah saw there was a daughter of a certain Canaanite, whose name was Shua, and he took her as a wife and had relations with her. And she conceived and gave birth to a son, and he named him And she conceived again and gave birth to a son, and she named him Onan. She gave birth to yet another son and named him Shelah. And it was at Chezbib that she gave birth to him. Now Judah took a wife from his firstborn, and her name was Tamar.
But Judah's firstborn, was evil in the sight of the Lord. So the Lord took his life. Then Judah said to Onan, have relations with your brother's wife and perform your duty as a brother-in-law to her and raise up a child for your brother. Now Onan knew that the child would not be his. So when he had relations with his brother's wife, he wasted his seed on the ground so that he would not give a child to his brother. But what he did was displeasing in the sight of the Lord. So he took his life also. Then Judah said to his daughter-in-law, Tamar, remain a widow in your father's house until my son Selah grows up. For he thought, I am afraid that he too may die like his brothers. So Tamar went and lived in her father's house.
And he did what?
Basically spilled his seed on the ground. He did not, he was purposefully trying not to conceive.
When you first read that, you remember your reaction to that?
I mean, look, looks rough, man. Looks really rough, man. And a lot of times it's where you see people's mindset kind of comes in with like, oh no, God is a tyrant to your God. I don't want to serve your God, or whatever the case is. As far as the reaction, yeah, I mean, it's rough, man. It's definitely rough. Rough sounding, rough looking.
To the point where, you have, the Catholic doctrine, they have a doctrine where it's like, they don't believe in contraceptives because of this scripture. Because they're saying that if God killed Onan for pulling out, it must be like, dang, maybe God is displeased with that. You know what I'm saying? So when I first saw it, I was like, dang, why did God, murk him for, doing that? That's weird, but let's continue to move on. Now, after considerable time, Shua's daughter, the wife of Judah, died. And when the time of mourning was ended, Judah went to his sheep shearers at Timah, he and his friend Hira the Adulamite. And Tamar was told, behold, your father-in-law is going up to Timah to shear his sheep. So she removed her widow's garments and covered herself with a veil, and wrapped herself and sat in the gateway of Enan, which is on the road to Timah, for she saw that Shelah had grown up, and she had not been given to him as wife. So when Judah saw her, he assumed she was a prostitute, for she had covered her face. So he turned aside to her by the road and said, let me have relations with you. For he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. He said, what will you give me that you may have relations with me? He said, therefore, I will send you a young goat from the flock. She then said, will you give a pledge until you send it? He said, what pledge shall I give you? And she said, your seal and your cord, and your staff is in your hand. So he gave them to her, and he had relations with her, and she conceived by him. She got up and departed and removed her veil and put on her widow's garments. So basically, she dressed herself as a prostitute, feeling the vibe, he's single, you know what I'm saying? So he got with it. So I'm like, so God murked his son for spilling his seed. But here you have Judah sleeping with his daughter-in-law, not knowingly, and no murking happened. So I'm like, God is God, But, you got some people that criticize God for this. Like, this is so make no sense. This is a man-made book. So let's continue to read on, verse 20.
When Judah sent the young goat by his friend, the Adulamite, to receive the pledge from the woman's hand, he did not find her. He asked the people of her place, saying, where's the temple prostitute who was by the road at Enaim? But they said, there's been no temple prostitute here. So he returned to Judah and said, I did not find her. And furthermore, the people of the place said, there's been no temple prostitute here. Temple prostitute. Wow. Okay. But let her keep them. Otherwise, we will become a laughing stock. After all, I sent this young goat, but you did not find her.
Now, it was about 3 months later that Judah was informed, your daughter-in-law Tamar has prostituted herself, and behold, she's also pregnant by prostitution. Judah said, bring her out and have her burned. Mr. Self-Righteous. It was while she was being brought out that she sent word to her father-in-law saying, I am pregnant by the man to whom these things belong. She also said, please examine and see whose signet ring and cords and staff are these. And Judah recognized them and said, she's more righteous than I, since I did not give her to my son Shelah. He did not have relations with her again.
It came about at the time she was giving birth that, behold, there were twins in her womb. Moreover, it took place while she was giving birth that one baby put out a hand, and the midwife took and tied a scarlet thread on his hand, saying, this one came out first. But it came about as he drew back his hand that, behold, his brother came out. Then she said, what a breach you have made for yourself. So he was named Perez. Afterward, his brother came out, who had the scarlet thread on his hand, and he was named Zerah.
So they had twins. Long story short, they had kids together. Make you wonder, why is that in the Bible? You know what I'm saying? What was the purpose of this whole thing? You know what I'm saying? So, you read this and you move on. We're going to jump ahead into Luke. I'm going straight to the Greek for a reason. This is the Textus Receptus. It's Luke chapter 3. So this is weird about this genealogy. Most genealogies begin from the beginning down to the person trying to get to, right? But this one is beginning from Jesus and going backwards now, right? So some would say like, hey, this is a contradiction because Matthew had the genealogy of Joseph. And this is saying, okay, this was Jesus being as was supposed, meaning that, okay, Jesus wasn't the son of Joseph, but it said Jesus Joseph, which was the son of Heli. But the reason why I'm going to the Greek, right, which was the son of right here, it's in italics because, the translators put that in there. When you look at the original Greek, it reads basically like this. Jesus himself was about 30 years old and was supposed son of Joseph. Then it just goes of Heli, of Matat, of Levi, of Malachi. Jesus is always going to be the subject of every genealogy here. So when you say Jesus, as was supposed son of Joseph, Jesus of Eli, Jesus of Matat. So this is basically the DNA bloodline of Jesus, right? Because Matthew gives you the bloodline of Joseph. So this is why Luke is a physician, so he's basically interested into the DNA bloodline. Remember, we mentioned DNA, the two twins of Judah. This whole thing happened with Judah, and God allowed it to happen because look at this. He's a descendant. Phares as part of Jesus' bloodline. So now let's go back to the point with why did God, kill Judah's son for spilling his seed? I think it's obvious that basically Judah's bloodline was a critical part of the DNA bloodline. Because if you look at all the people that God chose, like when he tested Abraham, right? In that time when God told Abraham to sacrifice his son in Canaan, right? That was common back then. The Canaanites, that was a common thing they did. So Abraham was like, well, I guess, this God that I'm following, he's just like the same as other gods. But, there was something that God wanted out of Abraham, which was obedience. You know what I'm saying? So this goes to show that God had his hand from the foundation of the world in the bloodline of Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Absolutely. It was necessary because he couldn't be the lion of the tribe of Judah if Judah didn't do what he did. And if the sons didn't want to obey, what are you doing? You're trying to stop the Messiah from coming.
Why did God, when the Israelites came to Canaan, why did God kill all of these civilizations, wipe them out? If you look at the prophecy in the garden, when he told the woman, your seed and to the serpent seed. So from the beginning, there was a prophecy about seed. If you plug the Bible in reality, DNA plays a big role in the decision that God made. God didn't want the seed of the Messiah to be corrupted by the corrupted Canaanites. And they got this thing called what you call the Kardashian Scale, right? Which is basically, it measures human civilization's progress based on technology, right? If humans were in harmony with each other, like what type of civilization they will become. Type 1, Type 2, Type 3, Type 4, and Type 5. Where Type 5 is where we're able to live at perfect harmony with our creation. But they say that we're not even a Type 1 yet. But on the other end, though, you also have this thing called Type -1 civilization, where civilization is at a point where it's unredeemable. You can't redeem them no more.
Yeah, definitely. And as a matter of fact, just taking it back to what you were saying about Genesis and, even the bloodline with, coming down through Judah, if you were to back it up a few paces. So Genesis chapter 6, and it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives, all of which they chose. This is going back to the Canaanite question you were asking, why certain bloodlines. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he is also flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men which were of old, and men of renown. God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast and creeping thing and the fowls of the air, for it repented me that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Now here's the key. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations, and Noah walked with God. But just getting to that point of understanding perfect in his generations, we get so commonly associated with things in terms of the way we use them in our modern vernacular that we don't often look deep into words to get to their root of what they really mean, the etymology, the history of that word, where it came from. This word could also be read as generations. This is talking about his genealogy. And so when you get into that word generations, that word itself is literally talking about the Toledo, which is essentially his proceedings, the genealogy, that bloodline that he came from, which is right back and what you just pointed out in Luke 3 there. The issue that was occurring, and there's a lot that can be unpacked in Genesis 6. You know, a lot of people talk about the book of Enoch, how it's not inspired, it's not part of the canon, whatever else have you. You got Genesis 6, this scripture literally parallels the first book of Enoch, chapter 6. You got Jude referring to it. You got Peter referring to it, literally quoting the book of Enoch. So I don't even get into the debate on whether or not it's inspired or not. But the point being, in Enoch, it unpacks a lot of what we see throughout the scriptures. And to your point, the importance of the DNA, the genes and bloodlines. And so the issue that was found was that Noah's bloodline was perfect. His genealogy was untampered with. But yet the rest of the world, as it backed up and said, edit that out, bro. The genealogy being that it is super important that creation maintain its good character that God created it with. And that was the importance, not only that, as God originally intended to be, most importantly, the Messiah was supposed to come through certain bloodlines in order for the plan of redemption to come through and come to fruition.
Said Noah was perfect in his generations, right? So when you go back to like Genesis 3, when he says Genesis 3:15, I'll put enmity between thee and the woman, and between your seed and her seed, right? And notice how it's that he's talking to the serpent and the woman, right? And you know, when we think about the word seed, you know, in the Bible sense, like we only think about the man's seed, but the egg is considered a seed too, because science proves that the man's seed and the woman's seed is 50-50 in the creation of a human being.
Absolutely.
And notice how like years later, you know, New Testament was written generations later, and you have a man be born of a virgin, her seed. God is not alive. So It's like, it goes to show you that like God created this world. You know, he knows about DNA. So he created, you know, to manifest the word, for the word to be manifested, he also had to create the perfect flesh being. And that took him how many years, man? From Adam fall to Adam. That was the whole purpose of God, the whole purpose of Israel. He even said that too, you know, Israel was chosen because they were the least of the nations. You know, there was no reason that God chose Israel because they were, you know, they were perfect. There was something, you know, that God was looking to create the new Adam because the first Adam, you know, fell. And it just amazes me, man, like how when you just take the scriptures and just plug it into reality, it makes perfect sense.
Seed wars, man. Seed wars, you know, and I mean, not even to get too far down the point, but I mean, if God has his seed and the pronouncement in the garden upon the serpent was, hey, the enmity is going to be between your seed and the serpent seed. That's a whole other line of questioning that you might want to touch right now. But
God, that would be episode, you know, whatever, 10 down the line. You know, but it just amazes me, man. Like, you know, the Bible is not a random book. It's not just a religious book and just principles you live by. It's the truth, man.
Yep. It's not religion. It's reality.
Mm-hmm. And when people see what we do with the movies, man, you're plugging the gospel in reality. You know, you're not just having this guy snapping his fingers, walking around. Like, this is real life situations that happen. Real life people that were getting healed. Real life things he said, you know, that still exists today. It's not just, you know, the things he said were relevant for 2,000 years ago. No. And we just can't wait for people to see that, man.